dive into some pretty wild news. This Indian Express article we've got is next level stuff. It's got firings and pardons and accusations about weaponizing the Justice Department. You know, Washington, D.C. is always a bit of a whirlwind, but this is something else. I think we're going to find some really fascinating stuff here.
It's just how fast everything is moving that's striking me. I mean, we're not even a week into President Trump's second term, and he's already completely overhauled the Justice Department. Makes you wonder, what's coming next?
Right. It's like someone hit the fast forward button on a political thriller. So just to catch everyone up, Trump is back in the White House after winning the 2024 election. But things are getting intense, really fast. Yeah. No smooth transition this time.
Yeah, and this all raises some pretty fundamental questions, you know? Like, where do we draw the line between a president pursuing their agenda and making sure we have a fair and impartial justice system?
Exactly. Okay, so let's break down this bombshell from the article. Over a dozen Justice Department employees, all of them involved in investigations related to Trump, were fired. I mean, can a president even do that? This just feels unprecedented.
Well, it's definitely highly unusual. You see career prosecutors in the Justice Department, they're usually expected to stay on no matter who the president is. It's kind of like a firewall to protect investigations from political influence. But these firings are definitely raising some serious concerns that the Justice Department is being turned into a political tool.
Yeah, the article quotes a Justice Department official saying that the acting attorney general doesn't trust these officials to assist in faithfully implementing the president's agenda.
So does that mean that loyalty to Trump now comes before upholding the law? It kind of feels that way. Yeah. Well, that's the worry, isn't it? The Justice Department's whole mission should be upholding the law fairly, not serving the president's personal interests. And this push to end the weaponization of government, that you hear from the administration, well, that was a big theme during Trump's campaign. And it's unsettling to see it playing out so quickly in these firings.
And on top of that, we have the mass pardon. Trump pardoned over 1,500 of his supporters who were charged in the January 6th Capitol riots on his very first day back. Where do we even begin with that? I mean, it's such a huge pardon, even legal. What are the implications of something like that?
Mass pardons are always controversial because they raise concerns about whether justice is being obstructed, you know, and whether the rule of law is being undermined. What's especially noteworthy here, I think, is that even people convicted of violent crimes were pardoned. It's a pretty big departure from historical precedent. And it really makes you think about what message this is sending about accountability.
Yeah, it's almost like they're saying actions have no consequences, especially if you're on the right side. But all of this isn't happening in a vacuum, right? We have to remember this is all going down while Trump is still facing heat from those investigations before he won the election. You know, the attempts to overturn the 2020 election, the mishandling of those classified documents. It's a lot.
Exactly. And I don't think we can just ignore the timing of these firings and this massive pardon. They're happening right as these investigations are heating up again. And the article also mentions that Trump is replacing key people in the Justice Department with close allies. Like, he's put Kash Patel in as FBI director, and Pam Bondi is the new attorney general. Isn't that a conflict of interest?
Yeah, having your close buddies in charge of investigating you doesn't exactly scream fair and impartial. This feels like something out of a movie, but this is real life. What's the legal line here? Is this even allowed?
Legally, it might not be a clear-cut case of breaking the law, but it definitely creates a massive conflict of interest. Putting loyalists in such critical positions within the Justice Department, well, it really undermines public trust in the system, doesn't it? I mean, how can anyone be confident that justice will be served fairly and impartially when you have this level of personal connection between the investigators and the people being investigated?
That's what I'm struggling with. And the article calls this an unprecedented shakeup and says it raises questions about civil service protections for federal employees. So what exactly does that mean? Like, can you just fire people because they're not personally loyal to you, even if they're doing their jobs properly? What happens to the idea of a nonpartisan civil service?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of the concern here. This isn't just about one president or a handful of firings. This situation raises fundamental questions about the stability of our government institutions and the future of democracy in the U.S.
Okay, so we've got firings, pardons, and cronyism all happening at warp speed. Where do we go from here? Like, what are the potential long-term consequences of all this? Should we be worried about the future of the Justice Department, especially in light of this quote about civil service protections?
Honestly, yeah, I think there's reason to be concerned. We're witnessing a concerning erosion of norms. and a very real possibility of the Justice Department becoming increasingly politicized. This could have significant and long-lasting implications for democracy and the rule of law in the United States. And that's not something we should take lightly.
I think you're right. It feels like we're on a slippery slope. And it's hard not to feel a bit overwhelmed by it all.
Mhm.
So before we get too deep into the weeds, let's take a step back.
Yeah.
Connect this back to you, our listener. Why should you care about what's happening at the Department of Justice? It might seem distant from your everyday life, but believe me, it's not.
That's such an important point. This isn't just about abstract legal principles. This is about the core of what makes a democracy function. A fair and impartial justice system is essential for protecting individual rights, ensuring accountability, and upholding the rule of law. If that system becomes corrupted or compromised, it affects everyone, regardless of their political beliefs.
It's like that old saying, justice is blind. But what happens when the scales of justice are tipped? By political pressure or personal loyalty? That's what feels so unsettling about all of this.
Absolutely. If we lose faith in the idea that everyone is equal under the law, the whole system starts to crumble. It's like the foundation of our democracy is being chipped away bit by bit.
And what's really scary is that this isn't just about Trump. This sets a dangerous precedent for future presidents.
Yeah.
I mean, what's to stop them from using the Justice Department as their own personal legal team? If we just let this slide.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It normalizes the idea that the law is flexible, that it can be bent or even broken to serve those in power. And that's a road we absolutely do not want to go down. It undermines the very idea of a government of laws, not of men.
Okay, so the Indian Express article does mention that there's been some pushback against Trump's actions. Legal experts are speaking out, and even some members of his own party are raising concerns. Does that give you any hope that this trend can be reversed?
It's a glimmer of hope for sure. It shows that not everyone is willing to just accept this as the new normal. There's still a sense of outrage out there, a recognition that these actions are deeply wrong and dangerous. But the question is, will that be enough to actually change course? Will those voices be loud enough to drown out the chorus of those who are cheering this on?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It feels like we're at a turning point. If we don't push back against this kind of behavior, where does that leave us as a country? What does it say about the future of American democracy?
It's a sobering thought. If the Justice Department becomes just another political weapon, then we lose a fundamental pillar of our democracy. We risk becoming a nation where the law serves the powerful, not the people. And that's a very dangerous path to go down.
It's like we're living in one of those dystopian novels.
Yeah.
Where the rule of law has been replaced by the rule of the powerful. It's all a bit overwhelming to think about, to be honest.
I understand that feeling. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of something this big and complex, but I think it's important to remember that even small actions can make a difference.
So what can ordinary people do to push back? Besides feeling overwhelmed, I mean...
Well, they can speak out. They can contact their elected officials and express their concerns. They can support organizations that are working to defend the rule of law and hold those in power accountable. They can educate themselves and others about the importance of an independent judiciary. It might not feel like much, but every voice counts.
It's like that saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So we can't be silent. We can't just let this happen.
Exactly. Apathy is the enemy here. We need to engage, to participate, to demand better from our leaders. The future of American democracy may very well depend on it.
That's powerful stuff. But let's bring this down to earth a bit. What does this all mean for the average person? Why should someone who's not a lawyer or a political junkie care about what's happening at the Department of Justice? How does this affect their daily lives?
That's such an important question, and it's one we should always be asking ourselves. At the end of the day, this is about fairness. It's about ensuring that everyone, regardless of their background, their beliefs, or their connections, has equal access to justice. It's about knowing that the law will be applied fairly and impartially, no matter who you are.
So it's not just about politicians and high-profile cases. It's about the very fabric of our society.
Exactly. It's about the trust we place in our institutions to protect us and to ensure a fair and just society for everyone. If that trust is broken, it has ripple effects throughout our life. It can make us feel less safe, less secure, less certain that our rights will be protected.
And I think that feeling of uncertainty, of unease, is something a lot of people are experiencing right now. It's like the ground is shifting beneath our feet, and we're not sure where we'll land.
That's a very apt analogy, but I think it's important to remember that we, the people, are not powerless. We have a voice, and we have a responsibility to use it.
So we can't just throw up our hands and say, it's all rigged.
Yeah.
We have to fight for the kind of justice system we want to see, right?
Absolutely. And I think the Indian Express article offers a glimmer of hope on that front. It highlights the unprecedented nature of these firings, how they raise questions about civil service protections. That means this isn't just a political fight, it's a legal one, too.
So there's a chance these fired employees could actually fight back.
Exactly. And if they do, it could set a precedent. A legal barrier against future presidents trying to turn the Justice Department into their own personal law firm. It's like drawing a line in the sand and saying this far and no further.
It's heartening to think that even in these uncertain times, there are people willing to stand up and say, no, this is not right. They're like those little Dutch boys, with their fingers in the dike holding back the flood of injustice.
And we need more people like that. We need more people who are willing to speak truth to power, to hold our leaders accountable, to demand a justice system that is worthy of its name.
So we've unpacked a lot in this deep dive. Trump's back, he's shaking things up at the Justice Department, and there are some major concerns about the rule of law. It's a lot to process, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed or even cynical about it all.
I get it. It's tempting to just tune it all out and focus on our own lives. But I think that's a dangerous trap. If we become apathetic, if we stop caring about what's happening in our government, then we've already lost.
So what's the takeaway here? What do we do with all this information, all this concern? What can you, our listener, do to make a difference?
I think the first step is awareness. You've already taken that step by listening to this deep dive. Now talk about it. Share this information with your friends, your family, your colleagues. Don't let this just fade into the background noise of the news cycle.
Yeah, and let's not just complain about it on social media. Let's channel that energy into action. Write to your elected officials. Support organizations that are fighting for judicial independence. And most importantly, vote.
Absolutely. Every election is a chance to reaffirm our commitment to democratic values, to hold those in power accountable, and to demand a justice system that serves all of us, not just a select few.
So here's what I want to leave you with. If the Justice Department becomes a tool for political gain, what does that mean for the future of accountability and justice in America? It's a question that should stay with you, and one that I hope will inspire you to act.
We can't take our democracy for granted. It requires our constant vigilance, our active participation, and our unwavering commitment to the principles of justice and fairness.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next week with another fascinating topic. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.